Thank you for tuning into the Open Doors International Scholars webinar. My name is Leah Mason, and I am the research lead at the Institute of International Education. I am joined today by Mirka Martel, Head of Research Evaluation and Learning at IIE, presenting Open Doors data for international scholars in the United States in 2020-21. The webinar today, which is being recorded, is part of the IIE Network Engagement Series. The IIE Network is IIE's long-established global membership association of over 10,000 international education professionals from more than 1,500 organizations and institutions. Through our IIE network, we share knowledge, expertise, best practices, resources, data, and other timely information that are designed to help organizations and campuses that are working to strategize and actualize international education efforts, including building international and academic partnerships, recruiting international students, and advocating for study abroad and student mobility. It is the best way to connect with IIE and have access to all of our programs, resources, and events. Membership is set up by the institution or organization. A primary member contact can assign additional designees and will receive membership benefits, including professional resources, which includes access to the IIE Network Engagement Series with exclusive content for members, including webinar recordings and briefings. Receive the IIE Interactive Weekly Digital Newsletter that provides updates on IIE and community opportunities and timely information on global news and trends within the higher education community. And will receive free print copies and digital access to IIE's core publications, the Open Doors Report and the biannual IIE Networker magazine. Research benefits include access to members-only Open Doors data online, access to attend the research roundtables led by IIE's Research Evaluation and Learning Unit covering data-driven topics such as international student mobility. Organizational visibility benefits include promoting programs and events, contributing to IIE's publications through article submissions for the magazine, briefing papers, and blog, and nomination for the annual IIE High School Awards for Innovation in International Education. Benefits for students at your institution include exclusive funding opportunities for institutions and students, such as the IIE American Passport Project and the Emergency Student Fund grants. Enhanced online directories to assist students find intensive English or study abroad programs. And finally, member exclusive discounts include priority registration and discounts on conferences and events, custom research data reports, global outreach and recruitment services, IIE's J1 Exchange Visitor Visa Sponsorship Program, and advertising options in IIE's publications and online directories outlined in IIE's media guide. Visit the website or email membership@iie.org if you wish to check membership status, renew your membership, update a list of member designees, or to join today. Mirka will begin with a 15-minute overview of the Open Doors data. Then we invite you to participate in the Q&A portion. Please feel free to enter your questions at the bottom of the screen, and we will try to address them as soon as possible at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Mirka Martel.
Thank you, Leah, and hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today. So today we're going to be talking about the Open Doors Project, and the Open Doors Project is the most comprehensive resource on international student and scholar mobility flows to the United States and US students studying abroad for academic credit. Open Doors is produced by the Institute of International Education, or IIE, with support from the US Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And for today's presentation, I'm going to be focusing on the International Scholar Survey, the fourth survey in our Open Doors project. So we're going to start by providing an overview of the survey. First, we're going to look at who received the survey. The Open Doors International Scholar Survey was sent to nearly 1,700 US higher education institutions that reported hosting an international scholar. Now, as you can see on the map, these institutions span every state in the country, and really go to various different institutions across the United States. Next, who did we count in the scholar survey? Our definition of an international scholar has not changed. It includes individuals at institutions in the United States on non-immigrant visas who conduct temporary academic activities such as research or teaching and are not enrolled as a student at that institution. So these can include postdoctoral scholars, visiting lecturers and researchers, short-term scholars, or visiting specialists. Finally, this is the second year that the Open Doors Scholar Survey shows the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The survey covered July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. And as we will see in the data findings, the COVID-19 pandemic really affected international scholar appointments and experiences throughout this reporting period. So now we're going to turn to the data for Open Doors international scholars. In 2020-21, there were 85,538 international scholars in the United States or at U.S. higher education institutions, a decrease of 31% from the previous year. Most institutions indicated that the primary reason for this decline was the COVID-19 pandemic, and that it was a continued decline reported from the previous year. Now, over 20 years of looking at international scholars' data, we have seen progressive growth to a high of over 136,000 in the 2018-19 reporting period. However, in the past 2 years, the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, depicted here in yellow, has significantly affected the number of international scholars at U.S. higher education institutions. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, there had been an incremental increase in the number of international scholars, ranging from 0.3% in 2016-17 to 1% in 2018-19. Then in 2019-20, the total number of scholars decreased by 10%. And now this year, the total has decreased by 31%. From this year and last year's data, we know that many scholars canceled or deferred their plans. Further, this year and last year, almost half of the reporting institutions noted that they had frozen new scholar appointments or applications, further decreasing the total number of new international scholars. International scholars in the United States were primarily from China and India, and together these two countries made up over 45% of all international scholars. However, we can also see in this map that international scholars continue to pursue research and teaching activities in the United States from every region in the world. Looking at our top places of origin, we see a large decline in total international scholars from China over the last 2 years. In comparison, we did not necessarily see the same level of decline in the total number of scholars from other places, including India. This indicates differences in travel restrictions and realities due to the COVID-19 pandemic in different regions and places of origin. Scholar appointments and travel from China were halted as early as January 2020, and we already saw this decline last year. In comparison, other places of origin, including India and Brazil, saw varying restrictions throughout 2020 and 2021. When we look at the regions of origin of international scholars, we see the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically on the total number of international scholars from Asia. Before COVID-19, the total number of international scholars from Asia increased significantly to over 80,000 international scholars from Asia alone in 2018-19. However, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have significantly decreased these numbers in the last 2 years, as you can see in red in the chart. Comparatively, when we look at Europe, we have seen a downward trend in international scholars in the last 5 years, and the COVID-19 pandemic potentially exacerbated this effect. International scholars in the United States conducted activities at U.S. institutions in California, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and many other states. These top 5 states made up approximately 44% of all international scholars at U.S. colleges and universities. However, as you can see, we did see that there were decreases across the board of the total numbers of international scholars in these states. Now we're going to look at the types of activities that international scholars pursued in 2020-21. Most scholars, or 3 out of 4, conducted research in the United States. Now, research has traditionally been the primary activity of international scholars in the United States, followed by teaching and also a combination of research and teaching. So all of these categories, primarily the top 3, have all declined. However, what we saw when we compare last year's data, 2019-20, to this year's data, 2020-21, we do see that research declined at a sharper rate. And so we're seeing a smaller proportion of research activity as a proportion of the total. Most scholars, most international scholars, are conducting activities specializing in STEM fields, including physical and life sciences, engineering, health professions, and math and computer science. A smaller portion of scholars have conducted activities in 2020-21 related to the social sciences and business and management. Again, what we did is we looked at a 5-year trajectory, looking from 2016-17 to 2020-21. And again, here in that 5-year trajectory, we see that there has been growth in international scholar specializations in physical and life sciences and engineering. These fields of study we saw were on an upward trajectory before the COVID-19 pandemic. The past 2 years, depicted in teal on this graph, show the primary cause or effect of COVID-19 on these fields of study. In comparison, when we look at health professions, this specialization has actually been on a downward trend even before the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, you can see that other specializations, including social sciences and some other fields, have been relatively flat in the past few years. And so what we're seeing here is that the declines are primarily potentially due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For the past 2 years, we have added a question to the International Scholars Survey to ask about the duration of the appointment of the international scholar. Now, this is newer data that we have, but we do think it's quite interesting. This is the total duration of the appointment, meaning if an appointment is extended, the full length is considered. In 2020-21, we found that about half of all international scholars, or 47%, were on appointments in the United States for 1 up to 3 years, or what we categorized as mid-length. We also saw that another 29% were on long-term appointments of over 3 years. And additionally, about 1 in 5 international scholars were on appointments of less than 1 year. Now, we have found this trend to change even since last year, and we attributed this to the effect of COVID-19. On the left, you have the 2019-20 data. And if we look at all of the international scholars in each year, we see that a larger proportion of scholars in 2019-20 were on short-term appointments. These means that these international scholars would likely have left and returned home. However, as we note from our data, they have not necessarily been replaced by as many new scholars on short-term appointments. And as a result, this category as a proportion of the total has decreased. The number of midterm and long-term scholars as a result has increased, but that is primarily because these types of scholars are likely to have been in the United States before the COVID-19 pandemic for longer appointments. We also will see that there is the potential that many institutions noted that scholar appointments have been extended. So scholar appointments may have also been getting longer as institutions have given the opportunity for international scholars to remain in the United States and extend their appointments. But overall, what we're seeing here is that a much smaller proportion of short-term international scholar appointments are happening in 2020-21. Very likely because many new scholar appointments may have been canceled or deferred, or the process may have been frozen altogether. As with last year, we continue to see that the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are affecting all factors related to international scholars at US colleges and universities. Now, we are including here the last 2 years of data when in the International Scholar Survey, we have been specifically asking about how the pandemic has been affecting factors related to international scholars. We see here over 2 years of data that the adverse factors affecting US institutions regarding international scholars have not dissipated and are at times even more exacerbated than in 2019-20. For example, in 2020-21, we found that institutions continued to face fully or partially closed facilities in 2020-21 and continued to focus on supporting international scholars among shifting guidelines. Most importantly, perhaps here is the last statistic, which shows that in 2019-20 and 2020-21, almost half of all of the reporting institutions to the International Scholar Survey noted that they had frozen new scholar appointments or applications. This points to now a 2-year halt in new international scholars coming to the United States and does affect the pipeline of international scholars teaching and conducting research at US colleges and universities. Now, before I conclude today, I want to share the myriad ways US institutions reported supporting international scholars amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, here we are showing 2 years of data to highlight the extensive efforts US colleges and universities have taken to support international scholars. The 2020-21 data shows an increase in the support provided to international scholars related to health, safety, and well-being, related to virtual collaboration, and travel restrictions and visa policies. It is also encouraging to see that 62% of US institutions continue to report extending the appointments of international scholars already in the United States. We welcome you to please visit our Open Doors website to explore this new data and to continue to be a part of the conversation by sharing your thoughts about the data that we presented here on social media. And finally, I wanted to share that the Open Doors 2021 publication is here. This year's publication includes special sections for each survey called COVID-19 in Context, and it provides additional analysis and insights into the data this year. The Open Doors 2021 publication is a wonderful resource, and you can purchase your copy now in our bookstore. The publications were just delivered to our offices this week, and I'm happy to share that IIE Network members will be receiving their copies soon. We want to thank all of the US colleges and universities who completed the International Scholar Survey, many of whom are listening to the webinar today. As always, we also want to thank our colleagues at the Department of State who continue to support our work. And finally, I want to thank our Open Doors team, which is incredible and has put together all of the data and the analysis and the presentation for today. Colleagues on the Open Doors team include Leah Mason, who is joining me on the webinar today, Natalia Andreyko, Ashley Holanda, who works on our website, and Nora Nemes. And finally, would it not be a better time for our research specialist, Julie Baer, to not return from her maternity leave on the day of the International Scholars webinar. So welcome back, Julie. So now I'm going to invite Leah back to the webinar, and perhaps we can answer some of your questions.
Please feel free to write your questions into the Q&A field at the bottom of your screen.
So perhaps, Leah, while we're waiting, what I can also share is all of the data that is available on the Open Doors website. And one of the things we have done in the last 2 years is to make some really exciting changes to the website and updates to the website. So not only will you be able to see infographics for the International Scholars data, which you can then share on social media and share with your colleagues, but we also have exciting data in our Tableau tables and in our interactive tables related to much of the data that we looked at today. So you can, for example, look at longitudinal data of total international scholar numbers, but also data related to our places of origin, related to the type of activity, and related to some of the other information we shared today. Finally, I also want to share that in honor of this release today, we also updated our annual release page. And so you will now see that the annual release button at the top right of your website will have additional information for each of our surveys. So not only our November release of the International Student Census and the Study Abroad survey, but also additional information for our International Scholars release today and our release of the Intensive English Programs, or IEP data, which traditionally happens in May at NAFSA. So we do welcome you to look at this new feature of our website. You'll see there both key findings, infographics, and other resources that you can use to really dive into this data further.
Thank you, Mirka. We have several questions coming into the chat, so I'm going to start with the first one. I know everyone is eagerly awaiting when our surveys will open, and so there is a question about, are the surveys for international students, U.S. study abroad, and scholars open yet?
That's a great question. So every year we do an extensive review process of our surveys. And as you all can imagine, over the last 2 years, these efforts have doubled down to really ensure that we are asking the right questions. Now, for those of you who have answered the survey, and thank you for answering the surveys every year, you will note that last year we had some special questions related to COVID-19 on all of our surveys. All 4 of our surveys had special questions related to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, we are taking a look at those surveys again. So we are still working on updating some of the surveys and some of the documentation for all of you so that they are very easy to answer. And we will be releasing the International Student Census survey and the Study Abroad survey in early March. The International Scholars survey, you may know, is not released until July.
Thank you, Mirka. For the release that we heard today on International Scholars, did it contain information on Fulbright Scholar Awards or top producing institutions for Fulbright student and scholar programs?
So we do not have specific data for programs. We do consider the information to be for all international scholars that are at U.S. higher education institutions. If you purchase the Open Doors publication, you will see some of the leading institutions that host international scholars. However, we do not do this by programs or by type of program. So what you will mainly see is that the over 85,000 international scholars that were hosted by U.S. colleges and universities would span any type of activity, including Fulbright.
Thank you. I have another question here asking, will there be an Open Doors International Student Census webinar this year? And so I'm wondering if this may be a reference to how to fill out the survey or the release of the findings, and maybe you would like to address one or both.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, we do very much take into consideration and take into mind that each of these surveys is necessary to review every year and to make sure that all of our Open Doors respondents and all of you at U.S. colleges and universities have the necessary information in order to fill out these surveys. And so we are putting together resources. We are working through whether that is a webinar, a fact sheet, or a tutorial, an online video tutorial, for us to be able to really give you all of the information and answer all of your questions about how to answer the surveys each year.
Great. One more survey related point I just want to add, because I think it came into the chat earlier, is that if you do need to change your contact information for any of our surveys that are out, please send us an email at opendoors@iie.org, or wait until you receive the survey invitation, and in that invitation is a place to change the contacts directly in the survey. Okay,
I will also say that the Open Doors website, apologies, Leah. I will also say that we've also made additions to the Open Doors website. So for those of you who receive information about the surveys in particularly the Census, Study Abroad, and Intensive English Programs, or IEP, when you receive that information in early March, there will also be a plethora of resources that are on our website in terms of how to answer the surveys. And again, there we have both worksheets, documentation for how to fill out the survey, as well as other resources, including FAQs and other information. And I will just say that our team is absolutely stellar. We always have Natalia Andreyko, Julie Baer, Nora Nemeth, and others who are available to answer your questions. And we also know that in the last year, there have been more questions because of some of the changes we have made and some of the additional data we've been asking about related to COVID-19. So we do encourage you to check out all of these resources, but if you still have a question, please just reach out to opendoors@iie.org, because we can answer your question. And if you have a special circumstance or you have a discussion that you would like to have, we would really be happy to have that discussion with you.
Great. Mirka, I want to turn back to the data. Even though we're excited about the new surveys launching, there are lots of questions here about the data that I want to make sure we get through. One is just really orienting to users to where to find it. So is it possible to have specific information or access to the Scholars database? I would like to know, what are the top receiving US institutions for Mexican scholars, for example?
So that's a great question. There is some information that is available on our website. And so again, if you go to opendoorsdata.org, you can access that information. You can go to the middle of the screen or to the toolbar at the top and choose International Scholars. And then you can find some of the basic information by place of origin, for example, for totals for the place of origin, or some of the leading institutions, for example. Additional data is available in the Open Doors 2021 publication, which is now out. Now, what I will say is we don't necessarily do every analysis of all of our data by places of origin or other information. So the one thing I will share is, if you have a specific request, if you have a request for some version or some look at the data, analysis of the data that you don't see on our website and would be interested in, we again welcome you to reach out to our team. And I believe there is both a custom data request form that you can fill out, or you can just reach out to opendoors@iie.org and we will take you to the right resource. And Leah, maybe you can also elaborate on this a bit more about how we can do some custom analyses.
Sure. On our website, we do have a space where you can request a custom data report. There is a form that we ask you to fill out, and it's very important to us that you be as specific as possible. So what country you're looking for, what piece of information, and also the purpose, why you are going to be using, how you will be using that information, should we be able to run that analysis and provide a quote. As you know, our data is collected in aggregate, so that is the format of much of the data that we are able to provide. So keeping that in mind when you're thinking about your request is really helpful. We're happy to sit down and have a conversation with you quickly to figure out, is this data available and what that would look like, and then provide you with a quote for that cost.
There is also additional information that we can do, additional analyses that we can do by, of course, the type of institution. For example, institutional type has been a fascinating analysis that we've been doing more recently. Regional analysis, analysis by different places in the country. Just for those who are in research, which most people I think on this webinar are, our unit of analysis is always the institution itself. That is who we receive data from. And so there are different analyses that we can do by the characteristics of that institution, by its size, by its type, by its sector. So those are the types of analyses we can do readily. When there is other analysis that is potentially down to the individual student, it is not as possible for us to do this type of analysis, specifically because most of our aggregate findings are at the institutional level.
Thank you, Mirka. We have some questions that are more regional or country focused. So one here that I have for you is in relation to Canada. First of all, the respondent says, very helpful presentation, great job. For Canada, can you show that there is a 12% decline in, or sorry, you showed that there is a 12% decline in scholars. Do you have any additional insight to the main reason? In addition to COVID, there was also social unrest in the last years. Do you have any indication as to how each of these elements affected the scholar mobility?
It's a great question, and I think that there are multiple factors. I think we've been looking at the trends by place of origin for international scholars, but also for international students. And so I think when looking at inbound mobility for various groups, we always look at the factors that are happening in that place of origin or that region. And in Canada, overall, what we've seen is that there has been a decline, but that decline has been smaller relative to other countries. And we have been looking at what some of those factors may be. Now, we do not ask institutions for each place of origin what that specific one factor or primary factor is. On the whole and aggregate, we have been able to kind of see that COVID-19 is the primary impact, but it is absolutely possible that there are other factors that have affected the total number of international scholars from Canada who are at U.S. higher education institutions. I will again note, however, that the biggest finding for Canada that we have seen, not only for international scholars data, but also for international student data, is that in comparison to other places of origin, these declines have been much smaller.
Mirka, along the lines of declines from specific countries, could you elaborate on what type of questions are we asking? Do we ask about the potential impact of specific policies or sentiment around declining numbers, or is there any other insight that we're gathering in the survey?
So we are very mindful of the length of the survey. The International Scholars Survey asks many different questions. You can only imagine when we're asking about aggregate data for every place of origin in the world that this is quite a lot of data. For those of you who answered the survey, know that it is quite a feat to compile all of this data. So unfortunately, we do not always have the space to ask the specific factors, policy-related factors, climate, geopolitical related factors that may be affecting our data. When it came to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was such a global shock to all mobility and all international educational exchange that we really needed to look at this factor. But it has been, even that in itself has been quite a temporary effect that we've been looking at some of the effects. So unfortunately, we do not currently have a question in the survey that specifically asks about what the primary factors are. But we think this is fascinating research. And we know that some other researchers are doing incredible research around international research collaborations, and international scholars on the whole. So we do hope that Open Doors data is a contributor to some of this analysis, but however, we also note that there are limitations to the amount of information we can collect through this survey.
Thank you. Turning away from places of origin and more to the mode of instruction and how universities were operating, was data collected on the virtual and/or hybrid courses provided by institutions? And if so, could you expand on this area?
So we did not collect information specifically on the hybrid versus in-person. It's actually a fascinating piece, and you've given me an idea of potentially looking at this in the future. We know just from the support given by U.S. colleges and universities to international scholars, in the one statistic I shared, that a number of U.S. colleges, or a majority of U.S. colleges and universities, noted that they were providing support to international scholars on online collaboration and online teaching. And whether that was access to online resources such as libraries or labs, or whether it was kind of the reality of teaching online, all of that can be encompassed in that statistic. But we did find that over half of U.S. colleges and universities were providing support to international scholars around virtual collaboration. Now, in other surveys that IIE conducts, including the Fall Enrollment Survey, including our IIE COVID-19 Snapshot series, we have been asking overall around virtual versus hybrid versus in-person. And we did find in our COVID-19 report, if you remember, Leah, that in the 2020-21 academic year, the vast majority of U.S. higher education institutions, most of whom were probably the ones who were hosting international scholars, were still largely virtual. And so the time period that we're looking at here, which is summer of 2020 to summer of 2021, would include that academic year, where I believe it was 90 or over 90% of institutions that were still operating in a virtual space. Now, what we have seen more recently in our fall snapshot survey for the 2021-22 academic year, what we actually have seen here is a larger move to hybrid, or some institutions even being in person. So I could see this now affecting the information, but that is combining data from different sources. It is just that we know that the population of U.S. colleges and universities do answer these surveys. And so we can look at some of the comparisons. So I guess my short answer is that through our COVID-19 survey, we did see that a very large percentage of these institutions were virtual. And so the conclusion that we can make is that a majority of these institutions were likely supporting international scholars in virtual teaching or other types of online collaborations.
Thank you, Mirka. Going a bit broader here, we have someone who is a new professional in the field of international education. Welcome to the field. Based on the data presented today and anticipated growth of the industry post-pandemic, what areas do you believe need support within international education?
So I think that that's a great question. I think that there have been a lot of realities related to the COVID-19 pandemic, but there have also been a lot of learnings. And I think particularly the last data point that we presented related to the support given to international scholars amid COVID-19 are areas that we should be considering moving forward. I think it's quite remarkable and impressive that U.S. colleges and universities have been in large part providing amazing communication to international scholars and international students on their health and well-being. And I have seen that this has been a larger theme in the field and has been a larger conversation and discussion around mental health, around the international education experience. And I think it's pretty impressive to see that this support is also being given to international scholars who are coming to the United States to conduct research, to teach, and that support for health and well-being is also being extended not only to students, but to scholars alike. And I think the second area that I definitely see as being a theme moving forward is related to online and virtual collaboration. I think that while virtual is not a replacement of in-person, it is a complement. And I think that we should be thinking about moving forward how these types of virtual collaborations can happen.
Thank you, Mirka. Our last question, unless there's any others, quick, type them in right now. But the last question I'm seeing in the screen right now is, will there be a recording made available today? And yes, I can say we will have this recording made available. It will appear on our Scholars annual release page so that you will be able to view it and listen alongside your exploration of the data.
Great. And the one thing I will add is I know it's still a few months from now, but IIE is going to be hosting a session on international scholars at NAFSA 2022. And so we will be bringing up a lot of these topics and others. We're very excited to have this session in coordination with some of our colleagues from U.S. higher education institutions. So please look out for that. We look to continue to have conversations around international scholars around the topics and the themes that we shared today, and to also continue the conversation, particularly going into this next academic year and the next cycle of collecting data on international scholars.
Great, there are no further questions, so thank you all for joining us today, and feel free to access the webinar on our website after today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.